This is the Louie T Network.
Man, I love some football. Man, I love some football. My favorite week is week 1, cause I'm watching football. First comes the preseason, and I don't take a day off. And then it gets even better when your team makes the playoffs. 32 teams go hard for one thing. They work for one thing. That Super Bowl ring. 32 teams go hard for one thing. They work for one thing. That Super Bowl ring. We in the lab room.
Louie T, welcome. You are in the lab room. Of course, I am your host, Lou. Thank you for joining me. Week number 15 in the National Football League, Thursday edition of In the Lab Room. Again, thank you for joining me here on the program. Before we can jump into a little bit of supply and demand, of course, need to break down the Thursday night matchup. And so let's jump into the Thursday night showcase, and then we'll talk supply and demand. We got St. Louis Rams at home hosting the Arizona Cardinals. Here's a matchup where I'm a little worried about the Arizona Cardinals. They were able to get it done. Like I said, and I'm sticking steadfast to what I believe in, and I've said this from the jump, I do not think this Arizona Cardinals team will lose a game at home this season, and that's what's going to save them in the long run. But I am worried about them on the road. They have a lot of road games in the division coming up, and so little worried about their ability to go on the road and get W's with their quarterback situation the way that it's set up right now. This is a really good defense. I've talked about that before, and so to see them going on the road against St. Louis troubles me a little bit. St. Louis might be playing some of the best defense, and again, let me temper this statement by saying this. St. Louis might be playing some of the best defense right now in the league. Past 2 weeks, pitched 2 shutouts, but they played against Oakland and Washington in respective weeks. So you don't want to put too much stock into what they've been able to do, but make no mistake about it, this defense is legit in St. Louis. And it took them a while to get the defensive line revved up because that's the strength of this team. We talked about it all offseason about the addition of Aaron Donald. Never ever trust a man with 2 first names, and him coming into the lineup and solidifying that defensive front and giving them that extra push up the middle and that quickness to get to the quarterback. You already know about Long and Quinn on the edges. Long goes down with an injury early in the season. Quinn gets off to an extremely slow start, and this team paid for it on the in the standings with wins and losses. But ever since they've been able to kick it into high gear, Quinn has been an animal as usual. Long has come back and provided some pressure off the other edge. Aaron Donald, never ever trust a man with 2 first names starting to kick it into high gear. Guys like William Hayes starting to get pressure as well. Langford and company. Everybody's starting to step up, do their job. And so now this defensive front is starting to generate pressure, which is generating turnovers, which is turning into wins for this Rams team. And so I wonder about Arizona going to St. Louis. After the confidence that the Rams have right now, it's starting to swell, and it's at the point now where a win here in this game can get them back to 500 on the season after being under 500 in the entire season. This Rams team has never been at 500 since starting the season off, they might have gotten a 1-1 after beating Tampa Bay. I don't know if that was week 2 or week 3. I could be getting my weeks tangled up, but I believe that was a week 2 victory against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So they haven't been 500 since being 1-1 on the season. So we're talking all the way back to the first month of the season in week number 2. So to get back to 500 this late in the season is something the Rams haven't been able to lay claim to since maybe the playoff year. Back when Sam Bradford took this team to the playoffs, or may have missed the playoffs, I believe, that final game of the season against the Seahawks. They weren't able to get it done. But I think this might be the latest they've been 500 since that season. So this could be a huge win if they can get this at home for the St. Louis Rams. I look at the Cardinals and I talk about this quarterback. Let's just talk about these injuries for a second, because I want to ignore these injuries, act like they don't exist, but they do. And at some point, these injuries are going to take its toll and catch up with this Cardinals football team. You lose Carson Palmer. That's a huge loss. No Honey Badger potentially in this game. Believe he's not going to be able to go. Andre Ellie has been put on IR. He's done for the season. I mean, these injuries are starting to mount. I mean, we're not even talking about the John Abraham situation, which, you know, limits your ability to get to the quarterback. That happened way earlier in the season. Don't even know if he really wanted to play football or not. And so there's just been so many different circumstances. We could talk Daryl Washington. Look, this team has endured injury and loss after loss after loss after loss. And now we're at the point where it's getting out of control. And so I'll say this. Cardinals have a chance to win this game because they are the better team in this football game. But the better team doesn't necessarily always win. They're on the road. I don't like Drew Stanton on the road. St. Louis is playing with the utmost confidence right now. They're at home. Boy, I'll tell you what. If St. Louis can stay mistake-free in this game, that means no turnovers whatsoever. They can't have any fumbles, can't have any interceptions. I need Sean Hill to play a clean game. I need him to find targets when they're open, hit them. I need guys to make some plays. It'd be nice if Tavon Austin could get involved in the special teams game and give them a little something. Not necessarily a touchdown, but a huge return to set up some points. Be nice if this defense could create a turnover or two. And that's what I'm banking on. They'll be able to force Drew Stanton to turn it over once. They stay clean and they win this football. I don't expect a lot of points in this game. Both of these teams struggle to score points. And I expect this to be a low-scoring affair with the St. Louis Rams if they don't turn the football over. And I expect them to pay attention to detail, take care of the football, and find a way to get it done. This Arizona Cardinals defense is no slouch, however. They can generate turnover 2 or 3 in this game, and if they do that, they're going to win. But I see St. Louis doing a job of keeping clean in this game, steering clear of turnovers. Give me St. Louis in this game. I may regret this, but give me St. Louis in this game to find a way to get it done. Again, no turnovers is the key because nobody is going to light the scoreboard up in this game. I will say this, and this is my last thing I'm going to say before I give you my prediction. St. Louis struggles in these spots. I don't know if you've noticed, but it's been about 3 years. Remember that year where the Arizona Cardinals started off like 3-0 and Kevin Kolb was a quarterback? And the Rams sacked him about 10 times, jacked him up pretty good, gave him a concussion. That was the end of his career. And gave the Cardinals a loss there, and their season went into a nosedive, a spiral nosedive after that. That's about the last time this Rams team has won on prime time. It seems like the schedule makers are determined to get St. Louis a win at home on primetime television. Have you noticed that? Every time these boys play, they're at home against a team in the division. I could reel off at least 3 of the last appearances on primetime television for these Rams, and they've all been losses. They're going to be at home on primetime television tonight in this game. They were at home earlier this season, if you recall, when they wore their throwback jerseys against the 49ers. Got up early in that game, lost to the 49ers. Remember last year, similar spot, Kelly Clemens and his scrappy bunch hang around, go all the way down the field at the end of the game, can't get in the end zone, lose to Seattle. So they've been in this same spot a number of times. It's always at home. Schedule makers love to put these Rams on national television at home in St. Louis, but no matter what the situation is, I'm going with the Rams, sticking to my gut. They can't turn it over though. If they turn it over, Arizona will win this game. That's the way I feel, but I expect them to find a way to stay clean and stay away from the turnovers and win this football game 17-13 at home for the St. Louis Rams in Week 15 to get them to 7-7. This will be a huge loss for the Cardinals if they can't get this one. Will drop them to 10-4 in the season and allow the Seattle Seahawks with a win on Sunday against the 49ers at home to tie them up in this divisional race. So that's your Thursday night showcase. We'll take a quick break. We'll come back and we'll jump into supply and demand. Welcome back to the program. Thank you for joining me here in the Lab Room Thursday edition. And we're now in the supply and demand segment of the show. A fan favorite. Not a lot of participation this week. So again, we're falling back into bad habits. Don't just watch, participate. And so, not a lot of questions this week, but I will hammer these two questions that I did get. And so we start with Robbie Sohal. Who do you think will be the MVP? Who do you think should be the MVP? And he said that, and then he also chimed in with the response that I agree 110% wholeheartedly with. He basically said, I believe that Aaron Rodgers is going to win the MVP, and I think J.J. Watt should win the MVP. Totally agree with you 110%. I think you hit it right on the head. They always err on the side of caution when it comes to the MVP. They love to give it to the quarterback, and rightfully so. You get it. You understand the logic there. Quarterback touches the football just about every snap, controls a lot of what happens in a football game, and I get it. But I look at the MVP, and it stands for most valuable player. And where would the Texans be? They wouldn't even be in the playoff discussion. This is a team with Ryan Fitzpatrick at quarterback, and yet they're 7-6. With a chance, an outside chance. It's a long shot, but they still have a legitimate chance of winning their division, and they can still sneak in the back door as a wild card in the AFC. Now, they're not going to do either one of those things, but still, the fact that they're even in the discussion gives you even more reason to believe that J.J. Watt is the most valuable player in this league, because without him, I mean, what hasn't the guy done? He's got more touchdowns in the season than Andre Johnson receiving. He's got... I think he scored touchdowns in three different ways. A fumble recovery for a touchdown, an interception for a touchdown. He's caught passes. The guy's doing everything he can. He's got double-digit sacks. He's forcing fumbles. I mean, I don't know what else he can do. And if he weren't on this football team, this is a 2 or 3 win team right now. So to me, he's the MVP of the league, but it's going to go to a quarterback. It's probably going to go to Aaron Rodgers, who is playing lights out football. I can't take anything away from Aaron Rodgers. What he has done this year, nothing short of magnificent, and he's got his team in the driver's seat to win the NFC conference and have the number 1 seed and put them in an advantageous position to make it to the Super Bowl this season. You go to Q Ball in football. What up, Q? And he simply asks, name some coordinators that could be up for head coaching jobs to keep an eye on in this offseason coming up. And I'll throw out a few names that come to mind. You look at the Arizona Cardinals, and the first thing that you think of with that football team, defensive coordinator Todd Bowles. After you get past Bruce Arians and the magnificent job he's done coaching his football team, you look at this defense. They've been in a lot of tight ball games, and the reason they've been able to either hold on to leads or get leads late in games is because the defense has done some serious work throughout the entire game. And in a number of instances, the defense is on the field at the end to hold on and preserve victories. And Todd Bowles has been a guy that has been relentless in applying pressure to opposing offenses all season long. I think he's a name that's going to garner some attention. Will he get a job? Can't say for certain. I think he'll be in a couple of interviews this offseason. And if he does well in those interviews, don't be surprised if Todd Bowles is a head coach in the National Football League in the 2015 season. You look at another guy, Kyle Shanahan. And I know this guy was unceremoniously run out of Washington with his dad, but keep in mind, 2012, magical season for the Redskins. Robert Griffin III wins Rookie of the Year. Who was the mastermind behind that? Kyle Shanahan. Brilliant offensive mind in this league. You go to the Cleveland Browns situation in 2014, and I crucified this Browns team in the offseason, before the season started, when we did L.A.B reports, and I talked about the potential for this team to win. I gave them a ceiling of about, 5 games max. And that would be squeezing the rag dry of every drip of talent you had on that football team, especially with the impending suspension to Josh Gordon at the time. So for him to come in there and get Billy Ho, Brian Hoyer, to play at an exceptional level for about a half a season, have this team at 6-3 after 10 weeks of football, leading this division, speaks volumes. Kyle Shanahan is going to be in the discussion for a head coaching job at the end of the season. Whether the Browns win another game or not, the job that he's done this season, second to none, he'll be in the discussion for a head coaching job as well. Then you look at another guy that I love, Terrell Austin, comes over from Baltimore with Jim Caldwell. He was the defensive backs coach in Baltimore, comes over to Detroit with Caldwell, takes over the defense. Practically the same defense Jim Schwartz had a season ago. To a man. I mean, literally the same parts. He's getting them to play at an extremely high level. He's getting the most out of what he has. I think he's done a magnificent job. I'm talking about an outstanding job as a defensive coordinator. Lights out. And again, just like Todd Bowles, don't know if he'll necessarily come away with the job. But I think his name will be floating around league circles, and he'll get a couple of interviews and a chance to get his name out there. And I wouldn't be surprised in the least if he lands a job. Wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't. But his name resonates, and teams start inquiring about one Terrell Austin. And then you got a couple of special teams coordinators that I think are worth mentioning. Dave Phipp is a special teams coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles. We know about the season they've had thus far. And anytime you do the things that they've done, teams start inquiring about your mind and what has happened. And are you to be given credit for what has happened, or are there just breakdowns? Whatever the case may be, one's a fluke, two is skill. After you start doing things 3, 4, 5 times in a season, now it looks like the coaching is to partly be responsible for what's going on. And so I think a guy like Dave Phipp is going to get an opportunity to maybe interview for a couple of jobs. Also, John Fossil, Rams special teams coordinator, another guy to keep an eye on. Rams have done some magnificent things, and I think they've been the most creative. If you want to ask me, Dave Phipp has taken advantage of some opportunities, some bad protections. Guys have gotten through scot-free. Not necessarily him doing anything special to have this Eagles special teams unit get off. They've just been in the right place, right time. Whereas John Fossil, to me, has actually diagrammed some excellent play calls as a special teams coordinator. I think that this guy has done the best job of any special teams coordinator this year. And his success rate, his hit rate on fake punts, fake field goals, fake extra points, whatever, has been extremely high. I mean, he's been probably the most efficient special teams coordinator this season, and I think he is definitely a guy that needs to be talked to at some point in this offseason just to see if he has the pedigree. Again, his dad was a head coach, Jim Fossil, so it's in his bloodlines. I think he'll probably get a little bit of attention. He'll garner some kind of attention, I think, this offseason as a coordinator as well. So that is the extent of the questions this week. Just two, but they were two good questions, and I thank you for your participation. Looking for more of your participation. Now, we traveled back to last week to put a bow on the what if that was given to us by Cubone. Going to use the handy dandy smartphone to assist me with this. Now, keep in mind, let me run over what the what if was for last week. Cubone Football gave us a gem last week, and he basically offered up the following. You're a 5-11 football team, new head coach coming in. You're looking to get the most out of this team. You're looking to make the postseason in year number one. You feel like you have a talented football team, but the quarterback position is holding you back. You have a couple of options to weigh in the offseason to go about addressing that quarterback position. Now, option A, do you go out, get a veteran on the market, guy's going to be relatively cheap, not going to cost you a lot, and he's a solid football player. Only got about 2 years left in the tank, however, but he's an upgrade over what you already had. Do you go get that guy and look to invest in the future, in the draft, and look to stockpile this team with talent through the draft that way and just get a stopgap quarterback in free agency? Do you go with option B? There's a young guy on another roster that another team is looking for a second-round pick to get his services onto your football team. Do you fork over that second-round pick? Keep in mind, you don't have a lot of picks in the upcoming draft, so that second-round pick is a huge deal. Do you give that up, sacrifice that second-round pick in order to find out if that other guy on that other roster could be the franchise quarterback? He's young, he's never started in this league, but has a lot of potential. Do you give up that second-round pick? Or do you go with option C? There's a can't-miss prospect with some red flags coming out in the upcoming draft. Now, it's going to take a lot to go up and get him. You're going to have to be the number one pick to get his services. So that means you're going to have to give up a king's ransom trade a la the Robert Griffin III trade, Washington and Rams. Going to have to give up some picks. Maybe two ones, maybe 3 ones and a 2. Going to cost a lot to get him. But if he works out and if he gets it, this guy could be the next big thing in the league. Do you mortgage the future for the future, or do you sit tight and get the veteran? So those are your options, A, B, or C. Here's what you guys had to say. And so we start with Cubone, who gave us the question, and Cubone said, hey, I'm going with option B. I'm taking the chance on the young guy on another roster, giving up the second-round pick in hopes that this kid is exactly what we thought he was, and he's worth the second-round pick. And I'm moving forward there with this guy at the quarterback position, hoping that he pans out. And that's a solid choice. I can't knock you. I'll explain my option and why I think the way that I think, but let's run through what you guys had to say on the subject matter. We start with Robbie Sohal. And Robbie says, I'm going with answer A. Get the vet, he says. Wait for next year's draft. Draft picks are way too valuable to trade or waste. Quarterback is an important position, but an overrated one. An average quarterback can win a Super Bowl with a good defense, which requires a quantity of good players, all of whom are not as overvalued as the quarterback. Some of that statement is true, but you'll rarely find. Go look at the last 7 Super Bowl winners. Tell me how many of those are mediocre quarterbacks. You're not going to win a Super Bowl with a good quarterback or a okay or average or below average quarterback in a good defense. It's going to take a historically great defense. Circa 2001 Ravens or 2000 Ravens. I think it was 2000 Ravens with Trent Dilfer. That wasn't a good defense. That was a historically great defense. It's going to take that type of effort to win with a subpar quarterback. You're going to need an all-pro quarterback to win in this league. Really, you look at this. Look at the teams that are going to make the postseason this year. There are going to be 1 or 2 teams with a questionable quarterbacking situation. Look at their defenses and then see how far they make it in the postseason. Hard to find teams making it to the championship game in their respective conference without a top-notch quarterback. Just hard to do in this league, but that's Robbie's take on the situation. You go to Alan Walker, who basically says, look, we're in a league where you need to have depth because one glaring weakness on your team will be exploited, he says. He says, obviously at 5-11, you have some talent. You probably don't want to trade it away. Because you're a new head coach, you need immediate results, which is very true nowadays. He says, so I would take the small gamble, trade away my second-round pick for the unused backup quarterback to see if he is the guy or not. So he's going with option B as well. Okay, very interesting. I like a lot of what he said because in this day and age, we have knee-jerk reactions to everything. If a head coach comes in first year, trying to find his way, goes 3-13, you're talking about, is this guy going to potentially be back and whatnot? It's a mess right now. Guys don't get an opportunity to instill their program, to bring in their players. A lot of times you're on the hot seat before you even get to do all of those things. So winning is imperative in this league, definitely. Jan Norman says, I would trade those picks for the #1 overall selection. Then I'd rather trade him for the next best quarterback who doesn't scramble in the draft, or I trade him for a quarterback who's already established if that option is available to me. So he basically said what he's looking to do is he'll take the risk, trade up to 1, get that guy, and then see if he can't parlay that guy into something else that's more established. You'll be hard-pressed to do that. I mean, what you'll find in this league is that when a team has an established quarterback and this guy's getting the job done, he's not going anywhere. That's why there's never anything to have in free agency. There's never anything to be had in free agency because teams don't let their franchise guy hit the streets. And so to think that someone's going to allow you to trade for their guy, generally speaking, not going to happen. But he's going with option C. He's trading away the picks, going for the gusto. Good luck. You're going to need it in that scenario. You got Money Miz. Money Miz 14 says, I would go the free agency route because the team is 5-11, which means it doesn't have enough depth for you to give up valuable draft picks. Very true. He says, I would also pick up talent in free agency along with the quarterback to upgrade the talent to just go with my rookies in the draft. Just think about it. Potentially more talent and hopefully a game manager, at least at quarterback. You didn't give up any picks. Sounds better than risking it all on one quarterback on a 5-11 team. Absolutely, I get that 110%. More potential to be a bust if he has no help on a bad team. And my choice also sounds better than trading away a valuable second-round pick for an unknown commodity at the quarterback position to a bad team. Again, with little to no help or talent, the team is going to struggle. That's why going the free agency route, picking up talent and upgrades through the draft and free agency will all put your team in a better direction moving forward. Lovely. I love that response. I think he hit on a number of huge points. And I think that's what you have to do. And so if you ask me, I'm going with option A. I don't think, look, if I had a full complement of draft picks, then it's a different story. Maybe my 2 isn't as big of a need. But when you tell me I'm low on draft picks as it is, what I've found, and I'll explain this to you quickly and then we'll get out of here, is that if you would have asked me this question 3 years ago, I would have said, hell, I'll trade the second round pick. I'll go get this guy, this young quarterback, and see if he can't be the fix to my problem at the quarterback situation. But what I've learned over the last 3 years is that the great franchises, the constant and competitive franchises, the steady franchises, the franchise that we've come to know and trust as some of the most rock-solid franchises, they don't build through free agency. They don't trade away draft picks. They build through the draft. And over the last 3 years, I've come to an understanding that you have to have your draft picks and you have to hit on those draft picks. The draft picks are so valuable these days. They're the most precious commodity in all of pro sports. NFL draft picks are more valuable than any other sports draft picks. And the fact that you're talking about 2s are like 1s now. A second round pick is like a first round pick these days. I mean, you're getting that type of talent in the second round. You can't afford to trade that away anymore. And so I would take my time with this process if I'm the new coach, I'm coming in and I'm going to go out and get the veteran, use him as a stopgap. Hopefully there's a better option in the draft the next following year. If I'm an offensive-minded coach, maybe there's a guy in this draft that nobody's really paying attention to that I feel like I can develop. If he's in the right system, he'll fit what I want him to do and he can come in and help me. Maybe I go that route, but I'm not giving away my second-round pick. Especially if I don't have a full complement of picks. I need all my picks. I need to build this team the right way with young, talented football players. Can't afford to give that away. I need all my picks. I'm going with the veteran in free agency, and I'm going to build my team that way. So all of your responses were spot on, especially Money Miz. I thought he had a lot of great points in there. Thought Robbie Sohal's response, half of it was good. Don't necessarily believe in the mediocre quarterback getting you to the Super Bowl with a good defense. You're going to need a great defense, and mediocre quarterbacks generally don't get you where you want to go in this league. But I'll take my chances with the veteran and see if I can't build my team going with that route. I need my draft pick. So now let's get into the what if for week 15. And the what if for this week is a tricky proposition, but you may have a definitive answer on this one, but you're going to have to weigh the pros and cons. What matters to you most, basically, is what this boils down to. So here's the what if for this week. You're a 3-12 football team going into week 17. Hasn't been a very good season. Haven't had a lot to smile about. And so your season's basically done. Guess who's coming to dinner week 17, though? You're at home. Your most hated rival. So you fill in the blank. If you're a Bears fan, Packers are coming to town. If you're a Redskins fan, Cowboys coming to town. You fill in the blank. You're a Steelers fan, Ravens coming to town. Seahawks, 49ers coming to, so forth and so forth. You get the drift. Whoever you deem your worst enemy in your division, they're coming to town. Week 17 with a playoff berth on the line. Okay? They win, they're in. They lose, if you're able to get them and win in week 17, they'll be sitting right next to you on the couch watching the postseason. Nothing will make your day more so than making sure that your most hated rival is at home watching the postseason right with you when it starts next week. The only kicker here is, if you beat them, they're going home. But if you win this game, there are some consequences. If you lose this game, fall to 3-13 on the season, you are guaranteed the number 2 pick in the next year's NFL draft. The upcoming draft, you're going to have the number 2 overall selection. If you win this game, you go all the way to number 5 in the draft. If you lose the coin toss, you go all the way to number 6 in the draft. So, the what if is simply this. How bad do you want to win that game in week 17 and stop your hated rival from going to the postseason? Do you want to win the game, or do you want to lose that game and get the number 2 overall selection? Now keep in mind, if you win, that team is going home and you'll still be potentially in the top 5 of the draft. But how bad do you want to beat that team, or how bad do you want that number 2 overall selection? That's your what if for week number 15. Pretty simple, but it's very convoluted in the same manner. That's going to do it for me here on the program. I thank you for joining me. If it happens in the National Football League, whether big or small, we cover it all here in the lab room. Come back and join me as I continue to break down the National Football League here in the lab room. See you next time. I'll be back on Friday to give you my picks and break down that Thursday night football game, Cardinals and Rams. See you tomorrow.